has come to play. He's the biggest of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness!
2 on the clock.
Alrighty guys, and welcome back to NBL Supercoach sessions with myself and Jeremy Darke. It's been a big couple of weeks, mate, hasn't it? We've obviously been waiting for the NBL to come back on. We've had a bit of Australian Boomers action, but we're going to be talking the crux of NBL Supercoach for round number 10 coming up, mate. But how you going? How was the break? What have you been up to? We've been absolutely busy at the Basketball Fix. What have you been up to yourself personally, mate?
No audio coming from Jez there for some reason, but the producer can jump in here in the background until he figures his stuff out.
All right,
Yeah,
we're back
the actual
on track. No,
there we go.
it's the old mute button. I had a bit of a cough and a sneeze before we started, so it's all right. Shaking off the cobwebs from the break. But yeah, to answer your question, Josh, it's been a crazy week really with Fan Zone kicking off today, our new section on our website where all of you fans can have your say. You can send us in some articles talking about stuff that's close to your heart, something that you're passionate about. And you can join in on some forums. Yeah, lots of stuff in there. So go in and check it out at thebasketballfix.com and find your way to the Fan Zone and log in and subscribe to a free subscription and, yeah, get amongst it. But anyway, besides that, NBL Supercoach, it feels like it's been an absolute age, really. You can barely remember what happened in round 9.
Yeah, I'd actually, to be honest with you, mate, I'd like to forget about what happened in round 9, to be honest with you, mate. It was a bit of a disappointing round. It just sort of, I guess, is adding on every week this season so far. But let's jump straight into it, eh? Let's get into our rankings and our scores as of round number 9. So currently I sit at 2,309, so moved up 55 spots on the rankings last week, which was okay. I think I scored a very, very poor score, to be honest with you, and really didn't have much of a progression, I guess you could really say. But to move up 55 spots, I'll take that right now. I'm looking to obviously build over the next couple of weeks before nearly every team in the NBL plays double game weeks. But what about yourself, mate? What was your ranking to start off?
Yeah, well, I'm ranked 1,377th, so I'm still in touch. I feel like I can still make some pretty big moves heading into the last stage of the season. I scored 322 in round 9. So I think, also felt a little bit disappointing. I think we all suffered from the Tyrell Harrison mistake. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I think there's room for improvement, but it's getting to the point here now. I think after this little period now of week 10, week 11, then if you've had the cash and you've done the groundwork, you're really going to start to excel. So we'll see how we all go.
Definitely. I think it's really getting into those star players as well. So I scored 309 in round number 9 as well. And again, like you said there, mate, I was the victim of Tyrell Harrison's 42 captain score, which we will touch on a little bit later on in the episode. But yeah, I'm looking forward to touching on one man in particular, my boy, when we get into this next segment anyways. But what have you thought of Supercoach so far, mate? Obviously, we're 9 rounds in. We've obviously had the FIBA break now, a couple of weeks to sort of think about our decisions and all that sort of stuff as well. But what have you thought about it? Because there's been a lot of consistent performers, but there's been a lot of these star players as well who we probably expect more consistent performances from them, but we haven't really been seeing them. Guys like Xavier Cooks have had some pretty poor games. Bryce Cotton's had some really good games, some really poor games. A lot of these superstar players, we're seeing, I guess, really big differences between their best games and their worst games.
Yeah, well, you can look at even, say in round 9, we're almost ready to captain PJC on a single game week, and he scored 25. So I think you really, it brings the luck factor into it quite a lot, I think, because some of these players can have really, really big games. And especially on these double game weeks, I think players get managed a little bit. And a lot of the time you're having sort of one really, really big score and then an average score instead of like two absolute monsters. So Yeah, I think you need a little bit of luck, but you make your own luck. So it is extremely difficult. Like my first impressions of this being my first year of NBL Supercoach, it's difficult, man. It's like so much harder than NRL, AFL Supercoach. There's so much more you got to take into consideration. It's extremely difficult. And then, yeah, you need the Supercoach gods on your side week in and week out if you want to be in the top.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the biggest difference between you and I at the start of the season. It was really about those captain choices. You know, you were nailing those captain choices with guys like Xavier Cooks earlier on, who I couldn't get into my team. You know, just players like that where you got that little bit of an advantage early and you've sort of built on that margin the whole way through. And that's why you've started very, very well. I'll give you that, I think, for this season, because it hasn't been an easy season. I think a lot of it's been, like you said, luck, whereas last year it felt like a lot more of it was the star players getting more opportunity to obviously play their game. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit different. But let's get into our reactions from last round. Normally we say last week, but it's been a couple of weeks now, and we're going to kick it off with our best performers of the round. I'm going to kick it off first. So my two best performers, I'm going to kick it off with a guy called Matt Hurt. Now, I was very disappointed when Jack White went down with that injury because I had to trade out Jack White, and the original plan was obviously to trade out Matt Hurt. Now, Hurt's been in a little bit of a slump over the last, I guess you could say, 2 to 3 rounds where he's been scoring around that 20 to 25 and not really pushing much past that. And I think that's where it's been a little bit disappointing for myself. But he went out against my Perth Wildcats, and I was there live this night, and he was just absolutely dominating. And I checked his super scores at half time, and he was sitting on about 25, and I thought, oh, it's only really, 2 or 3 rebounds to get that double-double, and I'll see that little bit of an injection as well. So he ended the round with a 44, which was absolutely massive. He had 27 points and 10 rebounds against the Wildcats. And speaking of the Wildcats, now, I went a week early on him. I'll shout out to my mate Dan here as well, because we've been having a bit of banter. We have a $100 bet, $100 wager with each other in NBL Supercoach. And I said, you're going to bring in Bryce Cotton this week on the comeback? And he goes, not a chance. And I said, well, I'm going to do it because you're not going to do it. And he gave me 71 points in his return for the Wildcats. 46, I think it was, in the first game, where he had 33 points and a couple of rebounds and assists, and then just dominated, obviously, the Southeast Phoenix, and then was dominated in a sense against the Brisbane Bullets. But 71 in his return was massive. He only lost a little bit of cash with his break-even at 94, I believe, last week. So they were my two good performers. But Jeremy, what about yourself, mate? You got one name written down here as a good performer.
Yeah, Keandre Cook. We had a good discussion about him, if my memory takes me back correctly, of who to bring in, Keandre Cook or James Bateman. I think it didn't really sort of matter this week, in a sense, but because Bateman had that absolute monster with 51 points. So I think, Keandre Cook definitely was a big in. He scored 68. Before the round started, I had Keandre Cook as my captain, and then I got sucked into all the NBL Supercoach news and everybody else putting it on Harrison, and I changed last second. So that could have seen a really big difference in my score and in my rankings, and really sort of pushed it up, because I think anyone that didn't have Harrison did really well last week and moved up the rankings. So, yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. Should have kept it on Keandre Cook, but I'm happy that he's in my team, because with Brisbane going on a massive run from next week, so it's good that he's there in the back pocket this week.
Definitely is, yeah. You couldn't have really gone wrong. Obviously, it would have been nice with the extra 15 points there with Bateman, but Bateman was the top scorer last round with 83, Cotton with 71, and then Keandre Cook with 68. So those two guards for Brisbane dominated. I think obviously Bateman had the extra boost with the 51-point game against the Wildcats, but I think long-term you've made the right decision with going with Cook, because it looks like he's got more of a solid game style where he's going to give you 15, 5 and 5, and that's a really, really sort of healthy Supercoach average to go along as well. But I want to give a shout-out to one guy quickly. That's Kendrick Davis. He obviously had 62 in that game against Melbourne United, where obviously all the controversies come out of that. And there's a question from Logan on our YouTube. Make sure if you've got any questions for us, send them over there or on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're watching. We'll try and answer as many of those questions as possible. But he said, any news on Trez and Davis? So Montrezl Harrell will be out for 3 weeks, and Kendrick Davis will be out for 2 weeks as well. So a bit disappointing, obviously, with their juicy run coming up. And a guy like Kendrick Davis has been on absolute fire with his 62 points in a single game week, which was actually the 4th highest point scoring of round number 9. But let's speak about the opposite end of the spectrum, mate, our poor performers. I'm going to throw it to you first, mate, because you've probably got, I guess, the guy who everyone has as a poor performer from round number 9. And let us know who it is, mate.
Yeah, well, it was definitely Tyrell Harrison. He was the biggest disappointment of the whole round. I would love to know the percentage of people that actually had him as captain, but like I said, I got suckered into it listening to all of the media and everybody's podcasts saying that you should have Harrison as your captain, and he bummed with a score of 42 over 2 games, which is extremely poor, obviously, and it is, yeah. And I think it's hurt in a way because everybody has brought him in for this big stretch. So I like before we get into it a little bit later about trades, but you had him on the chopping block already this week because it just doesn't really feel like he is going to be consistent enough. And if you're going to have someone as a staple in your team, you need that consistency and not these big swings. So he can't go from getting 20 rebounds in a single game to only scoring an average of 21 points over a double game week. So yeah, massive disappointment. Hurt a lot of us, but at least when you take these big hits, it's good that everybody else is on him, because it felt like he hurt the majority of the top Supercoach players.
Yeah, I've just gotten up the most captains of round number 9. So Christian Doolittle was the most captain player within the top 1%, with 55.2% of people picking him. And then you've got Tyrell Harrison, which was just behind him at 35%. And then it was a massive drop-off. You've got Keandre Cooks, Bryce Cotton. A few people were still capturing Jack White, who have ruined their season now, and Keanu Pinder. But yeah, my poor performer, mate. Now, I'm like you. I've got Tyrell Harrison, but I've also got Parker Jackson Cartwright. I started him on the single game week. I think majority of us are probably thinking Cairns Taipan's a really juicy matchup, probably looking at 35 to 40 points. We couldn't have been more wrong. 25 points when we're probably expecting, I've written down here 50 points, but just didn't really get going. He really struggled, I think, against obviously a Cairns Taipan's team who made that game all about Parker Jackson Cartwright's shutdown and obviously allowing the others to beat them. And, they had a really good game there as well, the Cairns Taipans, which we may touch on tomorrow in our Beyond the Buzzer episode. But yeah, obviously really, really disappointed with Parker Jackson Cartwright. Lost a little bit of cash. It doesn't really matter. He's a superstar player. I'm going to hold him for as long as I possibly can. But it's really, really interesting to see, obviously, what happens there in the next couple of weeks. But let's jump into the schedule thoughts now. And I'm just getting the schedulizer up on my phone right now. But double game weeks this week. So we've got the Illawarra Hawks, who only have this double game week, and then they're on a run of singles after this. Then you've got the Perth Wildcats, who have still got another double game week next week. Then we've got the New Zealand Breakers, who will go on a run of 4 double game weeks, including this week. And then you've got the Sydney Kings, who, like the Illawarra Hawks, will play a double game week this week before a run of singles. So it's going to make for some very interesting trades, because we've obviously got a number of top-end talented players who are going from a double game week to a single game week the week after. But we'll discuss that very, very shortly. But, Jez, the single game weeks, mate, obviously it's everyone else, but who should we be looking at over the next couple of weeks who have got a nice run?
Yeah, well, I think it is that. Like, you touched on it a little bit. We've got New Zealand that still are going to have another 3 double game weeks after this week. So I think most of us still are carrying New Zealand players because of, they've been on a little bit of an off and on run of double game weeks. When it comes to Perth, it's pretty much time now. I think you can start getting rid of some of these players that you've been carrying. Some of these players that have kind of hurt us a little bit. Like I think there's a lot of people that brought in Pinder, and he's been inconsistent. He's been one of those players, like we've said with Pinder on all our podcasts, has a massive game one game and then has been a bit of a dud the rest. So he can definitely be on the chopping block early. And then, coming into next week, Cairns are on a double game week. Adelaide are on a double game week. Now, I've been sort of looking a little bit this week about Adelaide players, because there is a big opportunity, because they're on a double game week next week, but then they go on a single, but they've got 7 double game weeks in the next 9 rounds after that. So it could be time to bring them in, so you start building up either your bench spots or you're the big key guys. But losing Kendrick Davis and Montrezl Harrell has absolutely thrown a spanner into the works. I felt it because I've held Harrell the whole time. Obviously now very, very cashed up because you can get rid of him, but I think there is some opportunities there. I think if you take some risks, if you're down in the rankings, I think it could be a good time to start taking some risks on some of these Adelaide players, because the risk versus reward can be very, very high. I was sort of even looking a little bit at Jarrell Martin, Isaac Humphries, players that might start to see a little bit more time, could be worth bringing in even this week, if depending on how your team's looking, obviously, because you could start to make some cash and score points if you can get on the right side of a little bit of luck with some of these Adelaide players. And then obviously Brisbane, they have the single this week, but I think a lot of us are starting to push them in because they go on a massive run of 8 double game weeks in a row. So how that affects them, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they go as a team. I think we'll touch on it a little bit in our Beyond the Buzzer episode, because Brisbane, it's time for them to show exactly what they are all about, and it'll be good to have a good load up of Brisbane players heading into this next stretch.
Definitely will be. Now, we're going to head to a quick little break here for a couple of seconds, and when we come back, we're going to be touching on our early trade thoughts and then going into and revealing our teams for round number 10. Alrighty, it's time to get into some of our early trade thoughts. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit interesting because, like you've been touching on, do we sort of plan for this week and trying to capitalise on points if we need to, I guess, if our teams are in a good spot, or are we looking ahead potentially? I've found this as one of the harder rounds, I think, mate, over the last couple of weeks. One, because I've been a bit of a dumbass and obviously used all of my boosts, so there's no chance of obviously making that third trade. I've only got the 2 trades and I'm having to live with them right now, but I've decided to trade out Matt Hurt and Jackson McCoy. Now, Jackson McCoy is one that's really interesting to me. He's got a break-even of 14. He's made about 90K over the last 3 weeks for me as a backup bench player. He's been giving me those early 20s to late 30s sort of score. So it's a bit sad to see him go out, but I've decided to bring in Xavier Cooks. Now, obviously, he's only got the 1 double this week, but he's a really genuine captain option for sure when you're looking at it. They've obviously got some pretty juicy matchups. But the other one that I've gone with, and I don't like it just yet, it's going to come down to a couple of things, which I'll explain in a second. But I've brought in Wani Swakala-Bullock. Now, he scored, I think it was 19 last round. He's been sort of averaging around that sort of 12 to 13 point mark. He's not really going to make much cash. That's the biggest thing for me now as well, is am I looking obviously for some points or some cash? He doesn't really do either, to be honest with you. It's a bit of a filler only because he was one of the only guys on a double game week that I could afford. But what I am obviously tossing up is the fact that, do I start Sam Menenga on a double, or do I start Tyrell Harrison on a single and I can bring in Rocco Zakarski? Now, the only way I bring in Rocco is if I start Tyrell Harrison and obviously move Sam Menenga to the backup forward spot. So that's the biggest sort of question on my mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts after you reveal your trades, mate. But what are your trades? Because you've got a big-time move, obviously, bringing somebody in, and then you've got a big-time move, dropping someone as well. So let the viewers know what you're doing for round number 10.
Yeah, well, the big drop is obviously Robinson. Finally getting Robinson out of my team. He has been doing absolutely nothing for me at all, besides, I think, even losing cash. I think his break-even, again, was at something at like 18 or 22 or something like that, but finally got him out for Bryce Cotton. So just a little bit of an upgrade there. So really starting to build some depth in at point guard with some players that I can keep there don't have to worry about that position really anymore over the next few weeks, which is nice because it's one less thing you got to think about. Besides when every team goes on double game weeks and you got to work out who to start and who not to who to have on your bench. But
Headaches.
then I've also Montrezl Harrell has gone. over, obviously because he's out for 3 weeks, I think he was sitting around somewhere like 445K or something in those realms, possibly. So you can't sort of have that much cash sitting on your bench. So I have traded him for Rocco Zikarsky. Now, I probably wouldn't have traded him out this week if he was playing and wasn't suspended. My first initial trades was to actually trade out Harrison, Tyrell Harrison, and bring in Xavier Cooks, and bring in No, it was actually still having Zikarsky in for Tyrell Harrison, and then having that cash. And I was thinking about using a boost to bring in Xavier Cooks because I still have one up my sleeve. But yeah, it is what it is now. I've got like 230,000 in the bank, which I will likely splash next week to give myself some really, really good depth heading into the next couple of weeks. So that's really, really important. But it could also be that you need to save it because Adelaide go on that nice run, and we just never know what sort of mood Montrezl Harrell is going to be in. So. But it might even be good now with all of that drama to actually sort of wait and see how he goes playing in that first game and what sort of mood he's going to be in when he does return. But it gives a little bit of leeway. I feel pretty comfortable. I feel like I'm in a good position. Maybe not this week to have a really, really massive score, but I feel like with the trades that I've done, I'm earning a little bit of cash from Zikarsky, hopefully, especially with Josh Bannon picking up an injury while he was in the Boomers camp. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how that plays out heading in when we get a little bit more update on the team news on Thursday. So it'll be you hope for Supercoach that he's out or carrying a little bit of an injury, because it's going to help Zikarsky's minutes and probably his role. But obviously for your banana man Bannon, you want him to be healthy, and you want him to be healthy to play for Brisbane so you can actually see what they are all about in this really, really big period for them. But yeah, I feel good about my trades. Maybe a little bit of a quiet week in the score front this week if I don't get some luck, but I feel comfortable with where my team's at, actually.
No, definitely. I think you've nailed your trades, I think, personally. It's going to be interesting because I've written a lot of articles and I've spoken to a lot of people in the NBL world about Montrezl Harrell, and there's still a genuine concern, I guess is probably the best word, that he won't return to the NBL. So that's going to be the biggest thing over the next couple of weeks. Even something he posted today on his social medias, which, again, just didn't really help, I guess, the way that he wants to go about it, and obviously, the way that they sort of feel about him playing. But it just doesn't really seem like he's 100% coming back, and there's no certainty around that at all. So it's definitely going to be interesting because he's the highest sort of price player right now in NBL Supercoach. He had a break-even of 44, a projection of 46, unheard of realistically. Like, a guy he could probably, hit that break-even for sure. But let's get into revealing our teams now. Now, we're going to kick it off with myself first, mate, and obviously break down our teams, touch on who we're captaining, all that sort of stuff earlier on. But I'm looking forward to sort of doing this as well. We'll touch on our break-evens, some of our projected scores, and obviously cash flow as well. So we're just going to pull those teams up now. So here is my team. Now, projection of 402 currently, which is, again, deceiving because I haven't hit my projections all year. It's just a lie. I think we might as well just cancel that for my team every single week. It would be nice to get close to it, but I'm just not certain at all. Now, obviously, like I said, I brought in Xavier Cooks and Wani Swakala-Bullock. Now, as it currently sits, I've obviously got Sam Meninga at the centre, with Parker Jackson Cartwright and Bryce Cotton as the guards, which I think will be the most popular combination this round. And I've got Xavier Cooks and Christian Doolittle. So all reports are that I've heard, spoken to people, Doolittle's going to play. So that's massive. He's been training. He had a bit of a knee complaint against the Brisbane Bullets. They just decided to rest him because it was a double game week. So all reports are he will play, which is nice. And then, like I said, I've got Wani Swakala-Bullock on the bench. Fabrian Krislovic, who I've got to get rid of at some stage very shortly. Tyrell Harrison, which I'm obviously going to hold for their massive run of double game weeks. Matthew Dellavedova and Benny Henschel. So the bottom three on my bench I'm pretty happy with. I think Tyrell Harrison can give us a 30 to 35 If, say, Bannon's out, he could even be more than that as well. Dellavedova's starting to find some sort of a bit of form this season. And obviously Ben Henschel on a double game week, we're starting to see him develop as well. Played really, really well for the Boomers in the Asia Cup qualifying games. So I think I'm pretty happy with my team. As you can see, I've decided to captain Bryce Cotton. But the only thing I'm a bit disappointed with my team is the fact that I've only got 2.6k next week to make trades. So that does force me essentially into a downgrade, upgrade situation, which is never fun because it's hard getting some of these lower price players and that present a little bit of value as well, so you can get up to these top guys. But we'll definitely see over the next couple of weeks, I guess, how it all works out. But what are your thoughts, mate, briefly on my team before we get into your team and discuss yours?
Yeah, well, I certainly like your starting five is pretty premium. I think that because it's who else could you have as a center? Sam Menenga has had some really, really big games, and he's had some quiet games. I think we all got lured in. His big games were at the start when they returned, so everyone got real hot on him, and then it's just been one of those guys that there's been higher priorities to get rid of. But yeah, I guess. But when you look at sort of the lineups, it's pretty tough to find. Okay, who would be the ideal center for
Probably
you
Froling,
if you could
I'd
bring
say.
someone in? Yeah.
Yeah, like it'd be
So
Froling, and like realistically, he's a guy who could give you 20 to 25, or I think he's more of a
yeah,
20 to 25 consistent guy, but you've got 100 extra K on top of his head with Menenga. So it's a great question. I
yeah,
think it's tough
yeah.
this week. It's been all year with centers. It's been pretty disappointing, I think. So yeah, great point.
Yeah, yeah. So I think otherwise that, but then yeah, I see that you're going to end up sort of in a little bit of a tough spot with your bench forwards because, like you said, you're going to have to downgrade either Xavier Cooks or Doolittle to be able to get some cash to make any sort of worthwhile trade to get rid of Swakala Bullock or Krislovic, because that's the sort of tough situation that you're going to be in. Or it'll be like sort of what in one way I got lucky that Montrez Harrell is out, because you could trade him out. All of a sudden I'm cashed up. I could make that upgrade. So that is a bit of a tough situation that you don't particularly want to be in, carrying two guys that you don't want to have in your team that you're going to need to be able to upgrade unless someone starts to really, really, really peak. So, but otherwise, I think overall, always going into a game week when you're projected 402 points is good. And it always makes me feel good too, because when you're projected over 400, it usually means I'm going to have a good week and you're going to have a shit one. So I'm happy about it.
I think I've been saying this for the last at least 5 rounds. The tides are going to turn eventually, mate. But let's get your team up on the screen here and analyse your team. I'm excited to see it. The projection obviously at 368, like you mentioned there earlier. It's looking pretty good. So run us through your team right now, mate.
Yeah, so starting guards, I have the duo, the dream duo, I think that's going to be stuck in most Supercoach teams for the rest of the season, with Parker Jackson Cartwright and Bryce Cotton. I have Tyrell Harrison still in there at starting center. And then I have Keanu Pinder and Sam Menenga as my starting forwards. Obviously happy with the guards. Can't get any better than that. Having Tyrell Harrison on a single game week, putting a lot of faith into him to score. You want him to score sort of 40 plus. So going to need a little bit of luck there. Or it could be as simple as, Josh Bannon is out and Tyrell Harrison is going to see all the action down low and in the paint. And then, it's rolling the dice with Keanu Pinder. Should get one good game out of him, considering he's on a double game week. So anywhere around sort of that 50 mark is good. And then, we've talked about Sam Menenga. That's also a little bit hit and miss. But I do like New Zealand's matchups. So, but it is sort of tough. I've got then on my bench Ben Henschel and Almanza. So 2 Perth boys. I've got 4 Perth players in my team, which absolutely is not ideal because you're not expected for all of them to go big. But it is what it is. There's not a lot I could really do about it. It makes it easier to get rid of 2 Perth boys next week, most likely. And then my backup guard. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're good. You're good. Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. No, I'm looking forward to it. I've got a question to ask you in a sec about that.
Yeah, my bench center, Rocco Zikarsky, it's all just about sort of money there. And I think he's had a couple of good games. I think this stretch for Brisbane, we should start to see a little bit more of Rocco. He was averaging like under 10 minutes at the start of the season, and he started to see a little bit more court time. He's been a little bit more productive. Feels like when you're watching these Brisbane games that he sort of maybe even struggled a little bit with the pace, and he was sort of sucking in the big ones. But it feels like obviously by getting more time, his match fitness is going to go up, and we should see him get amongst it a little bit more, and especially pushing towards the draft. He's got 10 weeks left of matches before he gets drafted. So you hope that he goes absolute gangbusters and really, really pushes to hold his spot in the NBA draft. Then on my bench at the moment, I've got Keandre Cook, which will sit there, and Angus Glover still has a pretty low break even. So he's just chilling there. I got sort of lucky with him. He was one of these guys like Tyler Robinson that was just absolutely bleeding cash and taking up space, but the tides turned with him. So I'm pretty happy with how that's gone, and he'll be earning a little bit of cash. So overall, I am genuinely pretty happy with where my team is, and with $236,500 in the bank, it sets me up really, really well for next week.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of the team. I think the only question I had, and you sort of answered a little bit there, was obviously the Perth Wildcats having 4 of them. And 2 of them obviously on your bench right now, which is nice. But obviously Keanu's been up and down, like we've said, all year. Bryce is obviously the juicy one for sure. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah. Luckily, you've got a couple of boosts. How many boosts you got? You got 2 boosts or just the 1 right now?
No, I've just got 1 left. Otherwise, I would have used one.
Be tough because,
I would have brought in Xavier Cooks like everybody else.
It would have been nice to have your current team structure last round as well, with obviously the 3 Brisbane players and obviously the 4 Wildcats players as well. But I think your team is looking good. I like the Parker Jackson Cartwright one. I think we'll touch on it very shortly, but it's almost a flip of a coin between those 2 guys. But the Rocco one's interesting. So you mentioned he's starting to find a bit of form. So all the way back in round 6, he scored 4 points against the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers. Round 7, he had 2 points against the Cairns Taipans. But since then, he's had 16 points against Melbourne United, 13 points against Tasmania, and then 23 against the Perth Wildcats. So, like you said, he's starting to find his form. I just think his Supercoach game is limited. Even like his overall game is to a certain extent. He's not a great scorer. He's a pretty good rebounder and a solid defender. So it is going to be interesting. But with a -4 break even, it's a very, very juicy option. But I think overall, mate, both of our teams are looking super, super good. But this is the most important time of the episode, ladies and gentlemen. Jeremy Darke's doubles. I'm interested to obviously see what you've written down as the number 1, 2, and 3 captain options for this round, because whatever your number 1 option is, I think I might have to go with this week, mate. So, let's go from number 3 to number 1.
Well, my number 1, I didn't say when I was revealing my team, but my number 1 is Parker Jackson Cartwright. But it is a little bit biased because I saw your team first, and my game is all about beating you in NBL Supercoach this year. And you took Bryce Cotton.
Good games.
So I've taken Parker Jackson Cartwright. But on the precedence it is, like you said, it's an absolute flip of the coin. But the coin should have 3 sides, I think, because it could definitely land on the edge. And the people that take that little bit of a risk of Xavier Cooks could definitely be rewarded this week. Because, first of all, I took PJC because I also like New Zealand's matchups a little bit better. They play the Hawks, who can leak points, and they play Perth, who can also leak points. Cotton could have an absolute massive game against Brisbane, but it also feels like maybe he doesn't. If Perth get up, he might need to have an absolute huge game, especially with the double game week. But I think the important thing in this that makes it even a harder decision is Perth have been having their double game weeks, and they've been home and away game weeks. This week, they're on a home game week. So we could see an absolute monster from Bryce Cotton. And then you've got Xavier Cooks, like I said. Yeah, you got Xavier Cooks in the mix as well. So they're playing Cairns, which could be absolute huge dominant performance. And then people might shy away from Cooks because their next matchup, Sydney's matchup, is against Melbourne. But it's kind of a matchup for me where I would expect Xavier Cooks to want to perform at his best and have a huge game. I think anybody that's got any stature in the NBL wants to have their biggest and best game against Melbourne United. So And we don't really know what's sort of happening with Jack White. There was some rumours that Jack White could end up on the court this weekend again. So that would be an absolute juicy matchup. I think it's one of the matchups that you want to see, that you would circle in the calendar, is Xavier Cooks and Jack White going head to head. But I think that could hurt Cooks' score, because Jack White, I think, has been phenomenal. He's been a real, definitely should be up there in the MVP talks. I think he's had an absolutely cracking season, both offensively and defensively. But we're talking about Cooks, and it could hinder him if Jack White does play. So I think, but flip of a coin, I think any of those three could go big, could go really big. So take your pick.
Definitely. I'm just going to throw one name at you, mate, and it's purely based around the fact of their matchups and for what's going on, and that's Sam Froling. So he's the only one I'm going to throw to you that I think may be a bit of a pod captain choice. Now, the reason I say that, they play the New Zealand Breakers, who, as we've all seen, Freddie Gillespie has left that team, so a lot of the pressure is going to be on Sam Meninga. Jonah Bolden's out for 3 to 4 weeks as well with a calf complaint, and Taco Fall has been dealing with injuries this whole season so far, and he's uncertain to play that game as well. So that really does open the floor up for him, but realistically, if you're bringing in Sam Froling, it's a tough player because you may have to boost him a bit later on in the season or next week, essentially, to get rid of him. So I'm not certain that it's the best move, but just in terms of a bit of a pod play, his last game against the New Zealand Breakers, he had 32 points, and his last game this year against Southeast and Phoenix, he had 35 points as well. So you're looking at just under 70 over his last 2 games against these 2 opponents as well. So a bit of a pod choice there for sure, mate, but one worth considering, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a very bold move, purely because Illawarra, I think, go on 2 single game weeks before they start going on their doubles. So like you said, you got to bring him in, and then you got to carry him over those next few weeks as one of your single game week bench players. And I think it's just tough on that price to take that risk, because it is very, very unknown, and it's unknown how New Zealand are going to play and how everything's going to go with Gillespie's 20 minutes. Not really sort of knowing where that's going to happen and with their injuries, but yeah, big call. Do it if you
Sure.
if you dare.
If you're ballsy enough. But yes, I've just changed my captain choice to Parker Jackson Cartwright as well, mate, just so you're aware. So you can go Bryce if you want.
Okay, what's your projected now?
Let's get into some of... I'm not sure. I think it was actually higher now, to be honest with you, but we'll see how we go.
Oh, really?
But we'll have a look, obviously, with a couple of these fan questions. Obviously, we've got people on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram watching along, and we've got a couple of questions to ask. Now, the first question is from our very, very loyal supporter, Logan. He's asked, is it worth holding Karim Lopez? Now, obviously, they've still got a couple of doubles to go. I think his role is going to increase, to be honest with you. I think you actually hold him. I see him as the guy who gets maybe Gillespie's minutes. I know they don't play the same position, but his defensive attributes will keep him on the court for a long period of time over this sort of run here where they're sort of integrating Taco Fall. So I think he's 100% worth the hold. What are your thoughts, Jez?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with Gillespie out, I think we've seen him develop. He's been getting better and better as a player. Crazy that he's still only 17, but he's definitely a hold through this situation. I wouldn't be trading him out until you know exactly what's going to happen there in New Zealand and how their structure is going to change. Like, his break even at 57 is the risk, but I think he's definitely worth keeping, because he could hit that 57 this week if he gets a little bit more time. He had a couple of games there where he was scored like 17 normal points, 10 rebounds. I think the other game he had 17 and 7 rebounds. So he's definitely a chance. He's a risk for not a risk, but a big chance for a double-double if he's going to start getting some more time and having to work a little bit harder under the rim to get those rebounds that Gillespie might have been hunting for. So yeah, definitely a keeper.
Yeah, definitely. You look back to that game, like you said, I think it was 17 and 10 and a couple of other stats as well. He had 51 Supercoach points in that game alone. So you've seen the ceiling, and that's what you like to see with these younger guys, is that ceiling. Yeah, I can't believe it, mate, but it's been a big letdown not having him in our team. He's currently priced at $271K. Like, that is just... it's unbelievable, to be honest with you. So it's a shame we haven't both kept him in our teams. Now, another question here. We've got 2 players to trade out of these 4. So we've got Karim Lopez, we've got Malik Lewis, Angus Glover, and Ben Henschel. Now, I'm going to kick to you first, mate, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So obviously, we've got Henschel and Lopez on the doubles this week, but Lewis has got a -4 break even, and Glover's got a -5 break even. So, who are you trading out and why?
I'm just bringing up the schedulizer as well. Southeast Melbourne.
So Sem play
have got a
two single
double.
games before going on a double.
Yeah, and then they have 2 single games after that. I think
Yeah.
Glover, yeah, I think that's really tough. With Glover and Lewis, you've sort of got to look at that. And then Henschel starts to go off his game weeks. Do you have his break even up, Josh?
Henschel, I'll be able to get
This
that
is
up in
a-
literally 2 seconds.
It's a
It was in the 40s, I believe, though. I'm just
yeah.
getting it up
So,
now.
but
So, sorry,
which is pretty much
33
where
break
he's
evens.
going to
That's
hit.
still juicy.
Yeah, so he could I would be definitely leaning towards these Southeast Melbourne players. But yeah, it is tough because they are going to make a little bit more cash this week. I'd probably, all right, if I have to make a call, I'd be getting rid of Henschel and choosing either Glover or Lewis. I think with Melbourne, with New Zealand having these double game weeks still, they've got 4 in a row. I think you definitely have to have Lopez in your team. So I'd be getting rid of Henschel and then take your pick with Lewis or Glover, whoever you think is going to score the highest over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the way you got to break this down is if you've got 4 Perth Wildcats players, you're trading out Ben Henschel, I think, personally. If you've got 3, I think you can hold him for 1 more week and trade him out, maybe next round if he doesn't perform well. So I'm actually a hold on Benny Henschel, and I'm also a hold on Malik Lewis. Now, the reason I'm not holding Angus Glover right now, potentially, is the fact that Derek Morton Jr. is starting to establish himself in that lineup again, in that rotation, and he will start to take some of Angus Glover's minutes, I think, and Malik Lewis is, a little bit more of a reliable choice, I think, for some starting minutes, potentially, with obviously the way he's been playing to start the season. But Lopez is a chance now. It always happens. We saw with Will Hickey last week. He's been so good this entire season, and then he scored 1 Supercoach point last round, and he's now on a really, really big downward spiral. And you just hate to see yourself make all this cash with guys like Kareem Lopez and then lose it all over the next couple of weeks. So for that, I am taking the money with Kareem Lopez. I'm keeping Malik Lewis, and I'm taking a bit of cash off him as well. So Henschel and Lewis for me there. Now, last question here is from a flying toilet. Now, I've seen you everywhere, mate. I used to listen to all the NBL Supercoach Insider podcast back in the day. But you've asked us about Mitch McCarron. Now, I'm a massive fan of Mitch. I love the bloke. He's such a good bloke. I've had him on the show before a couple of years ago. It just isn't working for him in New Zealand. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. He was like you mentioned here, you've commented he went from a premium round number 1 last year and a starting option to a sub 90K person on the bench now. It's tough because the rotations in New Zealand don't seem to be chalk and cheese. It doesn't just seem to be like we thought it was going to be. Parker Jackson Cartwright starts and plays 25 to 30 minutes per game, and Mitch comes in and plays that 10 to 15 minutes when he's off the court. It really is a mold of these young guys coming through. You've got Bairstow, you've got Antidovic, you've got all these young guys who are starting to play key minutes and big minutes for the New Zealand Breakers. So for me, I am not bringing him in until you see an uptick in his minutes. I think he's averaging like 8 or 10 minutes per game, which is you'd want to see a little bit more from him because the production on the court hasn't been the same. It hasn't really been in his hands, which is really, really weird. It seems like they're playing off him a little bit, and they're obviously making him a bit more of a shooter. So for me, I'm not bringing Mitch McCarron. I wouldn't be touching him with a 10-foot pole. But what about yourself, mate? Early thoughts on McCarron? Is he a viable trade option?
No, I don't think so. I think his role, like we've said, he's been brought in, I don't know, almost maybe in a similar role to Jason Kadee. It's like he's been brought in for his experience. He's there to be a part of the team, but he's not there to have offensive production. And NBL Supercoach is about offensive production. So I certainly wouldn't be bringing him in because it really doesn't feel like that's what his role is in New Zealand with, like you said, some of these younger guys all getting minutes and starting to develop. And he's the guy that's on the bench helping them develop. He's not the guy that's on the court showing them what to do.
Definitely. No, I think you've hit the money. And last question, which has just come in here from Kurt. He's asked if our boy, Nick Marshall is a genuine option. Now, I think he is. I'm a massive fan of Nick. I think he's got all the potential to be an absolute stud in the league, but he hasn't been able to have, I guess, the minutes or the production when he's been on the court. That's been the biggest downfall in his game so far. But with a break-even of 1, with Kendrick Davis out, and obviously with Montrezl Harrell out, there's going to be some more minutes. Now, I think the easy option is Jason Kadee will start, which is going to make him a very, very good choice potentially this week if you want to make a little bit of quick cash. But we've got to remember Kendrick Davis is only out for 2 games and Harrell's only out for 3 games. But I think he's genuinely a bit of a chance, but I wouldn't bring him in this week because there's still a chance that he is not going to score. You get this week as a bit of a freebie to see what he does with obviously Davis and Harrell out of the team. But yeah, I think guys like Kadee, guys like Marshall, even like you've mentioned, Jarrell Martin, Isaac Humphries, Lat Mayen potentially becomes an option again. These guys all become options again purely based around the dysfunction, I guess, in Adelaide with obviously these 2 guys out of the team.
Yeah, I think it's... For me, though, I think if you're going to take a risk on an Adelaide player, I think you need to do it now, especially if you're looking at some of the bigger guys like Jarrell Martin or Isaac Humphries. I think this is the week because you want to really take advantage of those 3 games. You've got this round and next round. When it comes to sort of your guards, Kendrick Davis is out just this week and then only half of next week because Adelaide are on the double game week. So everything gets resolved and goes back to normal in, round 12. So they are risks, and I think if you're doing it, you should be doing it purely to try and earn some cheeky cash. So if you're making some tough decisions, have a look at what you have in your team and possibly bring in an Adelaide guy already now because you don't want to miss that first hit of cash if they have a big week this week.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just to clarify that as well, so Harrell will be back in round 12, but Kendrick Davis will be back in the second game of round 11. So
exactly,
it's not really long, to be honest with you. But that will wrap up today's episode. We've thoroughly enjoyed having you guys all on the live stream tonight, answering a couple of your questions, and we're looking forward to plenty more of them over the next couple of weeks as well. But it's been fun getting back into NBL Supercoach talk. Now, if you want to check out everything else going on at the Basketball Fix, go and check out our website, www.thebasketballfix.com, for all the latest news, articles, and obviously, like Jez mentioned at the start of the episode, our fan zone, which is free to join. Just go on there, click on the fan zone section, sign up, obviously add the subscription as well, and just start obviously chatting everything about the NBL world with like-minded fans like yourself. You can touch on Supercoach stuff, you can touch on your team, you can touch on other teams, anything that is going on in the NBL. You have the space now to start creating and obviously talking with other passionate NBL fans like yourself. We'll be on there very, very regularly getting involved as well. We're looking forward to seeing where that goes and obviously takes a lot of people as well. So make sure you go check that out. Follow us on Instagram at the Basketball Fix Podcast, I should say. And obviously make sure you stay tuned as well for tomorrow when we have our Beyond the Buzzer weekly NBL show coming out. But until next time, that has been your Basketball Fix.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.